Welcome back, captains and trailblazers! Today we are diving into a very deep lore rabbit hole in Honkai Impact 3rd, the story of Sue. Now, this guy is not just another character. Sue is one of the most significant figures in the entire Honkaiverse. A man who transcended mortality, debated the very nature of existence, and ultimately became one with the imaginary tree itself. If you've ever been confused about who Sue is, why he's so important, and what actually happened to him, then this is the video for you. I will be breaking down his entire backstory, his deepest struggles, and his ultimate fate. And trust me, this one is insane. So let's find a nice tree to sit back, relax, and let's unravel the mind of philosopher Dr. Sue. Okay, first things first, who is Sue? To put it simply, Sue is a former scientist, warrior, and philosopher from the previous era, an era that existed 50,000 years before the events of Honkai Impact 3rd. He was one of the elite soldiers known as the Mantises, a superhuman warriors designed to fight against the apocalyptic force known as Honkai. But here's what makes him different from the other Mantis soldiers. While most of them relied on brute force to combat Honkai, Sue believed in something completely different. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a thinker, a man searching for the root cause of humanity's suffering. And what did he find? A terrifying truth about existence itself. Sue was originally a doctor, a kind and compassionate man who wanted to help people. But when the Honkai threat became too great, he was forced to undergo the Mantis transformation, enhancing his body to superhuman levels. Sue was granted the Signet of Bodhi, an ability that allowed him to perceive the truth of the universe. He could peer beyond the material world, understanding fate, causality, and the fabric of reality itself. But the deeper he looked, the more horrifying things became. Sue realized that humanity was caught in an endless cycle of destruction. The Honkai would always return, civilization would always collapse, and history would repeat itself forever. Faced with this, Sue made a choice. He would try to break the cycle. And this is where things get really crazy. To escape this doomed cycle, Sue and his closest friend, Kevin Castellana, helped create Project Stigma, one of the most ambitious projects in human history. The plan was simple on paper, but insane in execution. Humanity would upload its consciousness into a higher dimensional plane, escaping the physical world and becoming part of a collective mind. Very, very similar to the Orange Fanta in Neon Genesis. By doing this, they could break free from the constraints of fate and outmaneuver the Honkai itself. But here is the problem. Project Stigma required absolute sacrifice. In order for it to work, humanity's entire existence as we knew it had to end. Yes, humanity had to end in order to save humanity. Makes complete sense, right? Sue, being the philosopher that he was, struggled deeply with this. He questioned whether it was right to force humanity onto this path. And as he debated, Kevin, his closest ally, made the decision for him. And there was a lot of reasons for this. Kevin was a little jaded. Kevin, being the cold pragmaticist, was willing to do whatever it took to defeat the Honkai. Whatever it took. He believed in Project Stigma, and when Sue hesitated, Kevin took control of the initiative and just went through with it anyway. This led to a massive fallout between the two. Sue couldn't accept Kevin's ruthless approach, and he realized that if he wanted to stop the cycle, he had to find another way. So, what did he do? He turned to the imaginary tree, the very foundation of reality itself. And this would be the decision that changed Sue's fate forever. Now, let's talk about the imaginary tree. If you're unfamiliar, the imaginary tree is basically the structure that holds all the worlds together. Every universe, every possibility, every timeline, it's all connected to this massive godlike entity. Sue realized that the answers that he was searching for could only be found here. So, using his immense intelligence and the power of his signet of Bodhi, he found a way to ascend beyond the material world and connect with the imaginary tree. And here's where things get wild. When Sue merged with the imaginary tree, he gained the ability to see across timelines, universes, and even alternate realities. He became something more than human, an observer of existence itself. But this came at a cost. Sue was no longer alive in the traditional sense. He became something more like a consciousness embedded into reality. He could see everything, but he could no longer intervene, not directly anyway. Even though Sue had ascended, he still left behind a part of himself, a way to communicate with humanity. This led to the creation of the Elysian realm and the recorded memories of the Flame Chasers. Through these echoes of the past, Sue was still guiding the new generation, even if only as a lingering shadow. But that's not the only place Sue might be influencing. Now, there's a theory that Sue's consciousness may still be affecting the imaginary tree itself, meaning that his influence might extend across multiple games, including Genshin and Star Rail. Which brings us to the biggest question. What happened to Sue? At the end of his journey, Sue no longer exists as a normal being. He is transcended, becoming part of the imaginary tree. He is everywhere and nowhere, watching as history unfolds, but unable to intervene. Except only through communication via the Sue phone. Basically, he can only directly communicate with the people he had a deep connection with. So, Gricio, Fuhua, Durandal, etc. And he can only talk to them. He still has no way of directly intervening with the physical reality. But here's the thing, Sue's story isn't necessarily over. If he ever does come back, it could mean major consequences for reality itself. After all, Sue spent his entire life searching for a way to break fate. What happens if he actually succeeds? The last we saw him was at the end of the second key story, where he handed over the bubble world of the Seed of Sumeru over to Durandal and transcended to a higher dimension of existence. Here, he was greeted by a higher being, perhaps an Eon? This being congratulated his enlightenment and stated that they haven't met a human in eons. And this godlike being prompted Sue to a game of shogi, like chess, and if he wins, they will give him the answer he had always been searching for, the universal truth that governs even the Honkai itself. Now, let's touch a little bit about Anaxa from Amphorius in Star Rail. He is so eerily similar to Sue. Both are scientists who started with pure intentions, wanting to help others through research. They were forced to compromise their morals for the greater good, and they both took on a massive burden that haunted them for the rest of their lives. Anaxa's role in the preservation of memories and the ethics of consciousness preservation mirrors Sue's work with Project Stigma. Both characters explore the philosophical dilemma of survival. Is it better to save a few at the cost of many? Or should no one be saved at all? And just like Sue, Anaxa knows there is no right answer. So let's wrap this up. Sue is one of the most philosophically complex characters in Honkai Impact 3rd. He represents the struggle between knowledge and action, fate and free will, intervention and passivity. He could have chosen power, but instead, he chose understanding. He could have ruled, but instead, he chose to observe. And in doing so, he became one of the most powerful beings in the Honkaiverse. Su's story is one of inevitability. He started as a healer, but the world forced him to become something else. He did what he could, but in the end, Honkai always wins. And the same dilemmas that haunted him in Honkai Impact 3rd, they still linger in Star Rail. The same questions, the same impossible choices. The real question is, who will carry this burden next? So, what do you think? Will Su ever return? Is Anaxa the reincarnation or variant of Su? Will Su's influence ever truly disappear? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because trust me, there is so much more to explore in the Honkaiverse. Once again, I am Oofie, and thank you so much for watching.